Today we are doing a real-world review on the Sigma 16 to 28mm f2.8 for Sony mount.
Yeah, so we took this along with two other ultra-wide zooms out and about in Cape Town to shoot some landscapes, some city scenes. So yeah, let's see how they stack up against each other.
Now before jumping into these images that we've shot, we quickly want to run through some of the headline specs of this lens. Now first up, the weight and the size. It's really compact and small, 450 grams. It is also internal zoom, which is great for guys doing gimbal work when you balance your camera on the gimbal. It is also a weather resistant lens, and obviously it's a straight f2.8. Now to make this review a little bit more interesting, we want to kind of compare this to sort of some of the other industry standard wides in this range.
Yeah, of course, what's a lens review without a comparison? So sort of the industry leader at the moment, or in general, would be the Sony 16 to 35. It's also a straight f2.8. You can see there's quite a bit of a size difference there, a lot more elements and a couple extra blades in there. And then sort of the direct competition for the Sigma would be the Tamron 17 to 28, also f2.8, also full frame Sony lens.
Now just for reference, we were using the Sony a7R III, which we all know has got a really juicy high megapixel sensor, perfect to sort of pixel peep and look at the quality of these lenses. And as we know, these are wides, and I'm guessing you guys are expecting a nice juicy landscape photo, but that's not gonna happen right now. The first image we're gonna check out is a portrait image. Now, some people might not be using these for portraiture, but this is a really nice way to check sort of detail and sharpness. And if you look at the Sigma, this is a portrait we did of you. It was quite an overcast, like cloudy day, so kind of nice soft lighting.
Yeah, really nice conditions for portrait
yeah,
photography.
for portrait photography. And I mean, yeah, what's your opinion? I mean, when you look at the Sigma, it's really good.
It's really sharp. There's a huge amount of detail there, especially as you want in the eyes, around the eyes. Really sharp. There's a lot of detail in there. The contrast is nice. The color rendition is quite pleasing. Overall, really happy with the image
really
quality.
Positive, yeah. And I mean, obviously, when we look at the Sony, we know the Sony is gonna kill a lot of these images. I mean, there's very few lenses that compete in that sort of performance of the G Master. But I guess the idea of today's video is to see how well the Sigma stacks up to it. And to be honest, when you look at them not zoomed in, very, very close.
It's super close. I mean, you have to check the file names to double check which ones they are. But again, like you say, the Sony is the industry leader. It's in a different bracket to the rest of the lenses here. So we expect it to be that much better.
The other reason we did a portrait is obviously these are f2.8 lenses. So we tried to see if we can get any difference in the background blur. It was tricky to see because we didn't really have bokeh or lighting in the background. But I mean, if you look at the Sigma and the Sony, both equally soft. So I think, yeah, props to the Sigma, well done.
Yeah, absolutely. To come that close to the Sony is just next level. And then of course we're gonna have a look at the Tamron image as well. Again, really not a bad performance at all. There's a little bit less detail, a little bit less sharpness, but still a really, really good performance.
Next up, still no landscape. This time we're doing a close-up photo. So the Sigma, when you look at the minimum distance, you are looking at 25 centimeters. The Tamron is 19, and then the Sony is 28. So very close. You probably won't see too much of a difference. Obviously, these are not macro lenses, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we shot this photo of these yellow flowers, and all really good. Sharpness is pretty decent. Again, the Sony is a little bit crispier. If you look and you zoom into that little bug chilling on the leaf, you can really see the detail there. It does look like the Sigma missed focus a little bit.
Yeah, whether that was the Sigma or the camera operator, up for debate.
Human error, you know.
Exactly. You can still see where it did eventually find focus on that leaf in the background. All the details there, it is sharp.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And then the Tamron, again, it's sharp, the colors are bright, it performed well.
Yeah, I think overall, all three did a really good job. So yeah, pretty positive. For our next shot, we went to quite a famous spot here in Cape Town, the Boerkaap, and it's well known for its super colorful, bright houses. So this is the perfect opportunity to test images straight out of camera without retouching them at all. So when we look at these images, again, it's so close. Like it's really difficult to see any differences. We did finally shoot at a higher aperture. This time we shot at f7.1 on all of them. And also side note, we kept the settings the same for all of these images. The Sigma is doing a really good job. The Sony is doing a really good job. I mean, if you look at the Tamron, there is some differences.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, when you look at them all together from a glance, hard to tell the difference. But when you really start punching in and pixel peeping, the Tamron, the colors get washed out a tiny little bit. You can see it, particularly on the background there of the buildings where it's painted the pink and the green. It looks a tiny little bit washed out when you look at it next to the Sigma and the Sony. But again, the differences are so minimal, you have to really push in to see.
True, and this is images straight out of camera. Obviously, in a digital age we live in today, most people will be retouching their images. So these kind of things can be corrected with a little bit of editing. It's not like sort of the end of the world.
Exactly, it's so minimal, like bump up a little bit of vibrance and the difference would be hard to tell.
Now finally, we do have two landscape images, and we kind of wanted to test the coatings on these lenses, which is a really tricky sort of test to do because every company has kind of like their own terminology. So what Matt did is he shot this landscape at a wide aperture, and if you focus in on the defocus Table Mountain sort of heading into Lion's Head, where black meets white, generally you should be able to see chromatic aberration. And here is where the lenses definitely stand out to each other, right?
Yeah, and the Sony is proving its worth. So let's just start out with the Sigma. If you punch in, you can see there's a bit of a haze that gets introduced. We were shooting straight into the sun, so really putting it to the work. And you can see a little bit of a haze between the mountain and the sky.
And there was no filters on there because we did that on purpose, right?
Of course, yeah. Tamron, same story. It's even a little bit more hazy, but then when you switch across to the image out of the Sony, it's really crisp as you can get.
It's black on white. There's no purple, there's no haziness. So that really just shows you like why you're paying so much more for the Sony.
Exactly right. But even when you pull a bit further forward to the reeds that are in focus, you're not getting any of your color spill or anything like that. So still, you really have to look hard for the difference.
And now to jump to the second image, here you kind of wanted to test lens flare. Again, not something that you really see on specs on lenses and that. It's all about the type of coatings they apply to the lenses to remove flare and ghosting and chromatic aberration. And again, you can visually see there is quite a difference in how it controls the flare and the shape of the flare and if it looks good or not, right?
Absolutely. As you can see, both the Tamron and the Sigma, they're quite hard lines around those lens flares. They jump out quite hard at you. The shapes are very angular, whereas
like a football, like an American football.
Almost like a couple of footballs sitting on top of each other. The Sony manages it a lot better. You can see it's there, it's obviously there, it's just a lot more sort of pleasing to the eye.
Agreed, yeah. Next up, we wanted to test how the Sigma controls its distortion. Now, obviously these are wide lenses, so we do kind of expect some kind of distortion. You're never gonna have super straight lines when you're shooting 16mm on a full frame sensor. So looking at the Sigma, you could definitely see that these pillars going up on the left hand side, they're kind of like bending a little bit to the one side, right?
Yeah, they're definitely leaning in towards the center of the image at the top.
Yeah, which again, it's not completely unfair. These are wide lenses. And obviously the Tamron is a 17mm, so you'd expect less distortion, right?
Yeah, so you will get, as the perspective changes, you get a bit less distortion, and you can see even that 1mm difference makes a big difference when it comes to the distortion.
It makes quite a big difference, especially if you need to auto-correct your distortion in Photoshop. So that's quite a cool thing on the Tamron side of things. You can also look at probably like some of the sharpness in the corners on that little graffiti spot on one of the pillars. And I think all three lenses do a good job.
Yeah, all really sharp. The Sigma keeps a lot of detail in there. You can see the contrast is really nice in there. It's sharp. Again, as we expect, the Sony seems to capture that little bit more detail and sharpness in the edges, but again, we are expecting that. So for all our videographers out there, obviously we had to do a quick little focus breathing test, and the Sigma was incredible to see how little breathing there was in the manual focus. Jumping across to the Tamron, there was quite a large amount of breathing in there. Unfortunate, but it does happen. We think it's because of the slightly internal zoom, but you still see the front element moving. And the Sony also surprisingly had quite a lot of focus breathing issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, we think that maybe due to the fact that it's covering those extra mils on the wider end.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, the Sony is a 16-35, the Sigma is a 16-28. So maybe because it doesn't reach so much more, and also the fact that it's an internal zoom, it's handling the breathing mechanism of the focus, manual focus, way better. But that's like big ups to Sigma for that, because for the videographers out there, they're gonna love that. The focus breathing on this is not non-existent, but it's very minimal.
Handles it really well.
Yeah.
And on a similar note, the autofocus speed and accuracy, all of these lenses, super fast, super accurate, very sharp. We were doing the test in reasonably low light. The Tamron missed maybe once or twice, but overall, really good autofocus performance.
As we got to the office after shooting for the day and reviewing these images, we were quite surprised to see how the Sigma stacks up to its competitors. And just for our own peace of mind, we went into our workshop and we shot a Schneider focus chart just to really like check out the details and the performance of these lenses. And as you can see by these real world images that we've just shown you, the Sigma really stacks up in terms of performance to its competitors. And I mean, the competitors are quite different, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at the Tamron side, direct competition, very similar price point. Sony, on the other hand, the top level, it's going to be way more expensive than the Sigma, but all the sharpness, all the contrast, all the detail, everything you want in an ultra wide zoom is in that Sigma.
Yeah, and I think that kind of perfectly ends the video, that the Sigma 16-28 f2.8 is really a viable option if you need a wide angle, low aperture, full frame lens. So definitely go check it out, and we hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you next time.